Hey, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Necessity versus Commodity. I've got a three-time U.S. champion, 2018, 2022, 2023. He's a memory champion, and we'll dive into that. But the more important thing about today's podcast is actually he works with high-performing athletes, professionals that deal with life crippling panic attacks. And he coaches them how to eliminate that once and for all. So you're going to want to stay tuned because we're going to go through a lot of details of how to actually, if you deal with anxiety, but more importantly, panic attacks, how to overcome that, and the individuals he works with, and his unique ability to actually help people overcome that because he actually used to suffer from them immensely. So we hear about what he went through and how he discovered a way to unlock that and break him free once and for all. And if you want to think about high performance and panic attacks, like we all saw Simone Biles a few years back at the Olympics where mental health became an issue with her and she actually stepped out of a competition. And so often in today's world, high performers, whether you're a business professional, whether you're an athlete, an ex-athlete, whether you're military, something with a high level of performance that's needed, oftentimes we suffer from panic attacks. And John is here to help us show how to break that once and for all. And also, if you guys want to reach out to him, there will be details below in the comment sections. So you can do that because he's an amazing individual. And so, John, I want to jump in with you real quickly. You were just in China.
That's right. I was in
And
China.
tell me a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, I got invited to be on a show called Super Brain. And the crazy thing about this show is 400 million people watch it.
Wow.
400 million, which you guys think the Super Bowl is big. Super Bowl only gets about 120 US viewers, million, right?
Yep.
Only. This is
Only.
400 million, right? Because China is just so massive. It's one of the biggest shows in the world. So I just got back from that show. I can't share the results of that, but what I was tasked to do on the show was I went head to head against one of China's best memory athletes on the show. We each had to memorize 100 different random items were placed in 100 different lockers. So we had to memorize what locker number each item went in. Also, the 4-digit code to each of the lockers, like live on stage.
Wow.
And the crazy thing is, like, obviously that's crazy in itself, but we had to do them 2 items at a time, which that's something I've never done. So there was a lot of adjustments and things I've never done before, experience that I had to figure out not only how to do on the show, but to try to compete and beat this other guy in front of 400 million people. So
I can say a little bit of stress level is going to arise in that type of situation.
yeah,
Talking about like what you actually coach and help people through as well, like the level of stress that arises in that situation, like you just said, I've never done this before, so it's not like you're going on Jeopardy and you just have a bunch of facts memorized, right? Like you're actually going in and you have to memorize this on the spot, but also doing something that you've never done before, so you haven't even practiced or trained it. What was that experience actually like? Like trying to keep your emotions down, trying to make sure that you're doing what you need to actually memorize it, to not let
no,
fear, panic kick in and kind of blind you from success.
yeah. Luckily, I've trained this and worked on this over the last year or two or three, right? And what I mean by that is a lot of people try to block out distractions, and that's the opposite of what I do, and I think what everyone should do. So everyone wants to focus and perform, block out all distractions, shut off their mind, block out all the thoughts, right? That's cool and all, but it's not really realistic, right? So I, on the other hand, train to let's bring it all in. Let's allow that feeling to shoot through me. Let's allow that stress, that adrenaline to run through me. Let's allow the thoughts and the voices behind the people talking while I'm on stage. Just let it happen. And I train that way. And that's
Well,
part of how I overcame panic attacks too. And we can talk about that in a bit, but allowing all this to happen instead of trying to manipulate and force things away, which that's part of the reason we have anxiety, is because we're trying to manipulate, control, not just our environment, but the things that are inside of us, right? So on this challenge, when I heard we had to do 2 items at a time, I was like, I had to literally step out of the room and go sit in the hallway for an hour while I tried to figure this out. And there was frustration because it was like a language misunderstanding, a miscommunication that caused all that. So that stress, right, affected me. And I had to go and regroup, and I had to figure out how to do something I've never done before, days before I'm in front of 400 million people. And so all of the tools and experiences I've had leading up to that moment allowed me to thrive in that situation. Whereas
Yeah.
before I would have crippled and crumbled for sure.
When when you were just describing that, it made me think of the movie with Denzel Washington, where he's a military guy, the enforcer. And he checks his watch and he clicks it like, oh, it's going to take me 20 seconds to destroy this whole room. And everything slows down for him, right? And he focuses on every little thing, and the camera slows down. That's just what my brain played in my head when you were describing that. Is that kind of like what you mean? Like you're able to just slow and focus and pay attention to every minor detail?
Yeah, when you're in the moment, everything's happening. So you're feeling your body, you're feeling your heart race, you're feeling the jitters, you're hearing somebody yawn behind you. It's all going on. You're aware of all of it, but you're still able to keep your focus where it needs to be or bring it back. And that comes with practice, because
Yeah.
I think we're trained to do the opposite, and then our frustration arises, and then we just kind of jack everything up inside. So I would say that's absolutely what happens, is you become more aware of every sensation in your body, your feet on the floor, things like that, when you're in that moment.
I know that NASA, they train their astronauts. Majority of their training is on staying calm in high stress situations, right? Because if you're up in space, something's going wrong, you freak out, you're dead in 30 seconds. So you need to be able to calm and slow down and do what you do. Do you
Yeah.
feel a sense of time slowing down when you're going through this process or not?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's also speeding up, right? I sense it speeding up a lot. It feels faster, it feels slower. I think sometimes when things slow down, it also, you get in your head and it makes it worse. But yeah, I mean, it fluctuates for sure. It's not always a slow down, it's not always a speed up, but um, yeah, you get in that moment, and when time slows down, that's good, because you're sort of locked in. All of your
Yeah.
training has worked. All your preparation has worked for sure.
My curiosity jumps into, I know that we're going to be talking about how you coach people with severe panic attacks. Do you coach people on memory? Because obviously the brain is a muscle just like the rest of our body, and you can train it. And obviously you've trained and developed yours. Do you do that with people as well?
I used to be the #1 memory coach on Google. I used to Google memory coach, and I was the #1 result. And I did that for a couple of years during COVID. But I don't do that as much anymore. I will from time to time help people on big projects, but
Okay.
I think memory is cool and all, and there are techniques to learn and enhance memory. But I really wanted to help people with something that was, I think, more impactful and more needed, which is the emotional, mental arena of anxiety and panic. I think that can really change the world.
Yeah, I agree. And you and I have had talks before, and both of us have been in personal development for a lot of years. Mental training, personal development, physical training, all those type of things. Have coached a lot of people across a lot of different spectrums. Um, Tell me about your story dealing with panic attacks, because most coaches, when they coach, it's because sadly they've gone through a very dark period of their time and learned how to overcome it, and then teach people how to do the same. So let's hear about your story.
Yeah, this is really good, because I definitely suffered with anxiety for years, too many years, right? And tried all the things. It probably started when I was 13. I went through a surgery on my chest, and I changed schools, and it was just quite a dramatic change of events, and it started a lot of worry. For me, I just started becoming a worrier, and I started thinking ahead to prepare. at school to make sure people didn't bully me or I was prepared or get perfect grades, right? All this stuff. And it started developing then. But when I really started noticing the symptoms, when I look back, around 2018, 2019, I started really going wild in the memory world and like trying to become one of the best in the world at memory. And I was preparing for the 2019 World Memory Championships. And I remember trying to train like a certain number of hours a day. And I would wake up and want to train, but I couldn't. Like my brain was foggy. I literally couldn't think straight. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Like I would try all the supplements, go on walks, do the meditations, all this stuff. And my brain was just cloudy as heck, like and hot. My head was hot. And so naturally I started like figuring out, okay, I need to like start relaxing my body and deactivating my mind. But it wasn't fully helping. And over the years, I would compete in these online memory competitions. Like it was one-on-one in these quick memory events against people all over the world. And I was really good. I was like top 3 in the world. And every once in a while, we would do an event and I would freeze up. I would literally like deer in the headlights, just like in the middle of the memorization, like, and I would just like freak out and stop. And then at the end of the event, everyone would be messaging me, "Hey, John, what happened? Like, you okay? Like, did your internet go out?" And I would lie. I would be like, "Oh, someone came in. It's okay. Let's just go on to the next event." Because
Wow.
I was embarrassed. I didn't
Yeah.
know what the heck, you know? And it started just slowly getting worse. It was like mental paralysis, anxiety. When it really became scary was when it started developing into panic attacks. There were a couple times where I was at a family holiday in the gym with family all around, and I got this overwhelming surge of like, it was such an uncomfortable feeling in my body, like something is wrong. I didn't know what was going on. And they describe panic attacks as like sometimes it's an impending sense of doom. I was like, that's what this is. Like, I feel like something's really wrong right now. I
Yep.
can't explain it. It feels very uncomfortable. And I just wanted to get out. I just wanted to go outside. Well, fast forward to a couple of years later, I was having them here and there, and they were scary. I uh, I walked downstairs at the end of the day after working upstairs, and I'm in the kitchen. My wife's getting dinner ready, and I had this sense overtake me again, and my chest right here started tightening up, and my arm started tightening up, and I said, "Holy shit! I'm having a panic attack, or I'm
Yes.
having a heart attack."
Yep.
I didn't think panic attack. I didn't know what panic attacks were at the time.
Yep.
I'm having a heart attack. And I looked at my wife, said, "Call 911." She's like, "Why? What's wrong?" I like, just call it, like, something's wrong. And I'm sitting on the couch. I'm telling her, take the girls into the other room. Like, I was scared. I thought I was gonna die, like right in front of them. I didn't want them to see me like this. So they're in the other room. They're like, "What's daddy, what's going on?" And like an ambulance is on the way. Ambulance gets there. My heart rate's like 170 beats per minute, and they took me in and I calmed down and nothing's wrong. I was like, what the heck? They tested me. They couldn't find anything wrong. It's happened again. My face went numb. The left side of my face went completely numb while I was putting my daughter to sleep. And I thought I was having a stroke. Same thing. Went to the emergency room. Thought I was going to die on the way there. And then they tested me, and nothing ever checked out. And that's when I started realizing this is really bad anxiety. This is panic attacks.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, okay, I need not just relief from this. I don't want to experience this ever again.
And it really shows the power of the brain and emotions, especially when they're combined. When you were kind of just describing that, there was a situation. I used to help people, health and wellness, used to help people reverse rheumatoid arthritis, and understood the vagus nerve, and how our brain and everything kind of works together. And we've had some good conversations around that as well. And my dad, he went to the doctor and he had a test, and his PSA levels went way through the roof. So he's basically reading a book about how to survive prostate cancer. His brother had died of prostate cancer. His dad had died of prostate cancer. So it was something on top of, and he was sitting there reading. And I stopped at home for a certain reason that night. I had to use something on the computer. I don't remember what it was. I was printing something out, and I'm sitting there at the computer, and I hear my mom say my dad's name once, then a second time, and the third time it was major alarm. So I go running out, and it looked like he was having a stroke, seizure type of scenario, and stopped breathing and all that type of stuff. And we called the ambulance. Lo and behold, it was because he got so worked up reading about prostate cancer, his body, the vagus nerve, just said, "You're done," and just shuts you off. And if no one's ever experienced that type of thing, it's a pretty scary scenario. And so I can really imagine where you're going at and understanding, like, I don't want my kids to see me like this, and that's a pretty traumatic thing for a child. Like, I still think about that at times. You brought up that you tried a bunch of things. I've done a bunch of personal development and all those type of things throughout my past too. And I always have a love and hate relationship with it, because some of the stuff is really good, but sometimes, you were talking about the anxiety and getting ready for school and pre-planning all this type of stuff, right? And it's always one of my phrases of, I've got 99 problems, but all of them are made up in my head type of scenario. But we can put ourselves in such a frenzy. And so you getting to this point, you have all these little things, you've tried all these little things, but you're still find yourself in this situation.
Mhm.
I imagine that's probably a feeling of like hopelessness. Like, I've done all this stuff. Why am I there? So when you finally realize it's panic attacks, what's going through your brain at that moment?
Yeah, it was helplessness for me. Like, it's so frustrating because everyone means well. Doctors mean well, mainstream, everyone wants advice, wants to calm you down, but the advice doesn't fully get to the root of it. Everyone wants to calm you down, which is good. There's nothing wrong with being calm, but it doesn't get to the actual root. And they call it mental health, but it's actually more so emotional health, right? And the solution isn't the mind. People try to treat anxiety and panic with the mind, but the mind is the issue, right? So you're trying to solve a control issue with control, right? You're trying to force your breath into a certain rhythm, or you're trying to focus on a guided meditation, or you're trying to do some type of forced controlled event to solve something that's controlling. And so it
Yeah.
doesn't work. It doesn't get to the real. So my
It's force versus
frustration was,
power. Yeah.
yeah, it's force versus force. It doesn't work. So I was just never satisfied. When the doctor wanted to give me Xanax, I'm like, it doesn't work. It just numbs it. And by the time I'm having a panic attack, it's too late. The medicine won't set in. And therapy is the same way. Everyone believes, like, if I just understand the origin of my anxiety, like when it started, like, oh, I was 13 and I was going through this. If I understand that, then it'll go away. And it helps, but it's not going to get you to the real root, right? You're trying to solve your mind with your mind, and none of that really goes deep. So my frustration was just everyone telling me I kind of had to maintain it, like just manage your anxiety, which is kind of what a lot of people do. They don't know how to get to it. And I was like, F that. I don't ever want to experience this again. I don't want anxiety anymore, ever.
Yeah.
Tell me how to do that. And everyone's, kind of like, what do you mean? Like, so the reason I was able to figure this out is because I just didn't give up. I was like, I don't want coping strategies. I don't want soothing strategies. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I want to do whatever it takes to figure this out. And so that
That's
started the journey. Yeah.
and that goes back to, and my mom had rheumatoid arthritis. She was diagnosed as a juvenile. So my whole life growing up, I saw her suffering with that. And, the times that she was in pain, like, she'd be like, "Oh, the pain is so far into my bones." And I was always I'm just a super warm individual. So she called me her little heater box. So that was the times when my mom was in pain, I would crawl on the couch with her and just snuggle with her to make her feel better. And it was great growing up as a kid, bonding moment. But the medications, right? Like, it doesn't solve the problem. And that was a big thing with my mom when I got into health and wellness in my late teens, and then really started studying through my 20s. That was my goal. Like, can I solve this problem for my mom? And, I was able to do that, and I was able to do that for other people. And I'm glad that you went that way. And it was some of the things that you and I talked about, like doing this naturally, doing this correctly, solving the problem once and for all, not taking a medication to cover up, not going, hey, you're in a panic attack, just breathe in this brown paper bag, right? Like, don't, no, let's solve this. I don't want this in my life anymore. And let's get into, well, actually, before we get into kind of like your breakthrough discovery and how you help people now, there were two things you brought up earlier. One was when you're talking about the memory thing and you felt shame. You like, oh no, someone walked in the room or whatever. You didn't want to like tell people like you were having struggles. And I think so many high performers and athletes, why you work with those individuals is so important because so many of them don't want to admit to themselves or show weakness to other people or let other people know, hey, you all view me up here at the pedestal, but I'm actually struggling way down here, and they don't want to admit that to themselves, like I said, or to show that to anybody else, you know. And then you making the comment as well, talking about the hopelessness you felt, and I think a lot of people feel hopeless because we can't talk about it.
Mhm.
And the fact that you call it emotional intelligence and emotional wellness rather than mental health, I think is awesome too. So looking at where you're at now, what was the first step in you solving the problem?
I mean, the first step is knowing I had anxiety, because for years I would have denied it like a delusional optimist. I mean, the first step for me was like when you hit a wall and it gets so bad, there's no other option than to go the other way. And for me, I it's not that I wasn't attempting to solve my anxiety, I was, but I was doing it in the wrong way, and I just kept going deeper and deeper. And finally, when you hit the wall, that's the moment where you're like, all right, I need to do something completely different, like drastically different. And I need to go all in on this, not like make it like some little thing I need to work on. Like this needs to be a mission now.
Yeah.
And so I think that was for me was hitting a wall, hitting the depths. Like I had the worst night of my life. I felt so helpless, thought I was gonna die. Like you just live in this realm of just terror. And so it's like I had no other choice than to go the other way, you know?
Yeah.
And that was
You
it. Like once you make that choice, you just keep going.
you know, you kind of brought up, you know, being, you know, an optimist and not a pessimist. It's kind of ironic. I just wrote a post about that the other day. I see so many entrepreneurs out there that are struggling in business and they're being a pessimist of like, hey, like things are going horrible, like you said, like I'm here, but then the optimist kicks in and like the rah rah stuff, and that's where like sometimes you know you kind of said you know trying with the personal development, tried a lot of different things. Sometimes, excuse me, we can fake ourselves into a positive mood,
Mhm.
right? And oftentimes we're stuck between that pessimist and optimist back
Mhm.
and forth. And I was stuck in that for a long time. And that's a constant battle, kind of like the force versus force of what you were going through.
Yes.
And I realized to break free of certain things, I had to look at it as an opportunist. Okay, look for the opportunities and actually start taking action and self-discipline. That's a whole different kind of realm. So I love that you kind of brought that up, but you can't get to that point if you don't make the decision of, I don't want this in my life anymore. And
Mhm.
being honest with yourself, I'm dealing with this. And I think a lot of people cover that up. So the
Yeah.
fact that you had to get to that point, and if anybody's watching this, you don't have to feel helpless anymore.
Mhm.
Like John's here to help you out through that process. And so, John, you do something really unique, right? Like your process is something different. It's not therapy, it's not medication. So, that unique aspect of what you discovered for yourself and what you've been able to help other people and apply in their lives, let's get
Mhm.
into some details about that.
Yeah. I like what you said about, everyone wants to focus on like the positives and the gratitudes. Like that was one of my issues was everyone's telling me like focus on what you're grateful for, focus on your dreams, pump yourself up, listen to the music that makes you feel good. Everyone wants to feel good, but that's actually bypassing everything that's inside of you.
Agreed.
right? So when you,
Agree more.
let's talk about the root of this, right? Because once you know the root of anxiety, now you can work with it, right? The problem is we have conditioned control. Our mind is conditioned to control things, consciously, unconsciously. We have to admit that, right? And pretty much every human being has this. So don't be ashamed of it. It is what it is, right?
Human condition, right? Yeah.
We've been programmed, we've been conditioned. There's no one to blame here. It's just the way we have, right? We try to force our environment and our thoughts and our world to make us to fit in a way that will feel good.
Yep.
Every single thing you do in life is to try to feel good, right? So we try to manipulate and force little things here and there, and that causes control. Well, underneath that control, why do we control things? Because of uncomfortable emotions. We avoid uncomfortable emotions like the plague. The reason you want that dream house isn't for the dream house. You want it because of the feeling it will give you. So we're chasing feelings all the time. We're chasing positive feelings and we're avoiding the negative, right?
Yeah.
So every single thing you have ever pushed away in your life, uncomfortable moment, is still inside of you. And on top of that is our controlled conditioning to keep it that way, to make sure life matches the way we want it to so that this stuff doesn't come up. So now that we know there's a bunch of trapped, suppressed emotion in our body and our mind is conditioned to control, now we can unpack this, right? So obviously we want to release these emotions and process them out so they're not burdening our bodies and causing these physiological reactions and tensions and all of these things. But we also want to recondition our minds to let go. So you can't solve anxiety and panic with your mind. You have to let go of that control. And most people don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And they try to manipulate the mind to do this. Like, think about meditation. Focus on your breath. That's control. You're trying to control your focus, right? And there's nothing wrong with this, by the way, right? But I'm just pointing this out to get you guys to think differently about this, right? Same thing with what's another type of there's mindfulness. Like, that's a forced way of approaching your world and looking at things, right? There's, anything like that, using your mind to try to reframe a thought, like a therapist saying, oh, reframe that thought. That's exhausting. And that's control, right? There's a power to that. But the solution is to relax the mind. This is beyond the mind.
And you bring up something really, really unique and powerful there. And, like I kind of said with personal development, I have a love-hate relationship. The dark side of it, the personal relationship part, like you just brought up mindfulness, meditation, gratitude. You're chasing happiness, you're chasing a feeling. I had to learn to become to a place of just internal joy. That's not an emotion that's fleeting. That's just a way of being. The other thing is when you start putting all these things and you're trying to do all these things, I'm sorry, our brain and our body only has so much energy output every single day, right? Some people have 100, some people have 20. When you're focused on all of these little things, it exhausts you to a point where you can't even go emotionally. So you're actually building up more walls and causing bigger issues. And it's one of the biggest things I love about what you do, because that really is getting now down to the root cause of things.
Yeah.
And so looking at that emotional health, and you talk about, we can talk about the subconscious mind. We're replaying these stories in our head, these memories constantly. We don't even realize it sometimes. Someone reacts a certain way to us, we just unconsciously react the way from something before. Like, all the personal development stuff points that out, but you're going at such a deeper level, right? And so talk about that deeper level now. I really want to dig into that, because this stuff is where you change lives.
Yeah. I mean, think about me. Like, I'm a memory champion. I use my mind. I got so far with my mind. And then I realized I'm capped. My mind's only going to take me so far. So I have to let go of my mind to go beyond. That doesn't make a lot of sense to people. And I get it, because I was like, what do you mean? Right? You have to almost your mind is over dominant if you have anxiety and panic. So you have to dial it down. Well, how do you do that? Right. I have a 3-step process for releasing anxiety panic attacks. Right. And it doesn't have to do with the mind. Right. First thing is you need a parasympathetic nervous system. You talked about the vagus nerve, right? This is a must. Like, you have to have a regulated nervous system. If you're in anxiety, you're always do, like make a list, do something. You always feel like you have to be productive. And I
Yep,
was too. It's exhausting.
it
Even
is.
when you're sitting down watching a movie, you're thinking about what you got to do next. When you're in that state, yeah, you're like that.
I was gonna say, John, the more that you and I talk, the more that we are alike. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And a lot of people are like this. Like, it's normal. I think it's pretty normal in society. Normal. Um, that's a sympathetic nervous system. That's an overreactive do. So your nervous system is always on the go. It's like it's always flipped on. And that's a path to burnout, exhaustion, all kinds of nastiness. You have to turn the switch off in a way to regenerate your power, your voltage. And when you do this, when your nervous system is regulated, you can process out emotions like this, right? When your body's not tense.
Yeah, correct.
And so here's another thing. Like, everyone thinks, oh, I just need to relax, take a bath, massage. Those are all good things, but it's not going to regulate your nervous system as effectively as it can. Because what happens when you take a bath? You're still thinking about tomorrow, right? Your mind's still going. What happens when you get a massage? You're not actually getting to the root of your tension, right? You're not tense because you need a massage. You're tense because of all the stuff you got inside. So what I teach people is a really simple, like, laying down surrender method. I've learned this from a couple different places. Philip Attar, I've learned this from the Hemisync Gateway Experience. I mean, basically, you lay flat, completely surrender your muscles, head to toe, like micro muscles. You surrender your breath, and you just kind of like melt into the bed, right? And there's a couple other things I do to help people surrender their mind, like let go of their mind. Because a lot of people, when they're in that state, they're laying there like, what should I be doing? And again, that means your mind is on, right? We need that. We don't need to shut your mind off, right? That's control. So everyone listening to this is probably thinking, well, what am I supposed to do, right? I was the same way. It's so conditioned in us to want to do something the right way, or to do something while we're laying down, or to do something while we're meditating, that activates our nervous system. So we have to regulate our nervous system. This has to be a daily thing. You can't wait until you're stressed to take a bath or to do this, to calm down. It has to be a part of your life. Has to. Number one, must. Second thing is I teach people I call it the unhooking method. Basically, what happens when you feel an uncomfortable emotion or a storm of thoughts? How to release that. How to let it process out. Because I'm going to be very honest with you guys. I was talking earlier about I don't block distractions out. I let them overtake me. If you're going to solve anxiety and panic, it's going to be hard. You're going to have to literally face everything that's inside of you. The alternative is to push it away and to suffer, like be haunted by this stuff. The only way out, the only way, is to allow all this stuff that's suppressed in us out. So we need to regulate the nervous system. We need to know what to do when anger comes up, anxiety comes up, when you feel it in your body. So I teach that. And then the final thing is, you talked about this, there's things in the past that haunt you still, right? Memories, people. I have a process called catalyst integration, where you take those things that bother you and you transmute them. You release that energy from your body and integrate it into you. Because that's the goal, is to be unbothered.
Yeah.
Right? You take everything that bothers you and you make peace with it. And there's a way to do that so that your body is feeling safe and integrated.
When you talk about the nervous system, I don't think some people understand, if we use it, like if you look at a picture what the nervous system is with the body, like it's every part of you, like it's insane, right? And I always try to describe it. It's like guitar strings. And most people's nervous system is pulled so tight, like you
Mhm.
hit one string and the thing's going to snap. And that's where most people are walking around majority of the time. Or you can do a meditation and you calm down a little bit, but the moment you get out of that, boom, you're wired back up again. Or if a certain scenario pops up, dude, you're ready to snap again. And it does affect you multiple different ways, from your actions to your emotions to your mood. When you were talking and I was ready to say something, I got it when you were talking, it's crazy how often, and I've been like this on and off my whole life, and I've known that and I've worked with it. And is every day perfect? No, not at all. But if I'm watching a movie, I'm thinking about work.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking about working out. If I'm working out, I'm thinking about what I should be doing with family. If I'm do with right there's I'm always I should be doing something else with this, and so having to, like you said, detach your mind. And when you said that, my grandma, so I'm gonna start this story off. My grandma lived to be 103.
Wow.
And the last 4 years of her life or so, I went to go visit her at her assisted living place every 4 to 6 weeks, and we'd sit there and talk. Her body was gone, but her mind was brilliant still, like insane. Like she could tell you what she was doing April 14th of 1932, what the weather was like. I mean, it was absolutely insane how good her memory was. She had 30 of us grandkids, like 60 great grandkids. Remembered all of our names, all of our birthday, like just a steel trap of a mind. I've got a really good mind as well. And, we'll be sitting around talking, maybe we're up at the cabin, my parents are there, we're talking a story. I'll be like, oh yeah, don't you remember when I was 5 and this happened and this happened? Like I've got all these memories. People are like, oh, it's such a great thing that you have such an amazing memory. I don't remember that. Or how do you remember that, type of stuff. It's a very good blessing. It's also a curse, because every negative thing that I've ever experienced, I have just as good a memory on. And, you talking through that and talking about the memory of, and then anxiety, if I'm always thinking forward and can't sit still, I have all these memories that I'm playing constantly and can access them all the time. Like a lot of my memories, I have to almost like disconnect that. It's like pull that tape out of the machine, so I'm not replaying these things all the time.
Mhm.
And with your talking about like the little steps,
Mhm.
I've obviously figured out certain coping mechanisms for me, but I don't know if my problem's completely solved because I still have issues. So the reason why I kind of brought that up is because I think so many people are stuck between the past and looking forward.
Mhm.
And you talked about just detaching your mind, and a lot of people can't understand what that is. Totally do, because oh my gosh, I've actually, that's kind of what I do. Describe detaching your mind, because that's not what people really talk about or really hear.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I would call it detaching your mind, because then people think, how do I do that, right? How do I do, right? Versus just being. There's a couple issues in what you talked about. These are kind of two separate things, right? To be present, people try to like force themselves to be present, right?
Yep.
Force, it's again, it's a doing.
Yep. Yep.
But being present just means you're in the moment. Like if you're haunted by a memory of the past, that's part of your experience right now, right?
Yep.
Well, let's talk about these two separate things. The reason we're haunted by the past and then now worried about the future, they're related, because everything that happened in our past, everything we pushed away, stuck in our bodies. The feeling of that memory is what we're avoiding. So we're trying to, everything in the past that hurt us, whether we're aware of it or not, we're trying to look into the future and make sure we're prepared for the test or the day, so that the worry doesn't come up that's going to bother us because of something that happened in the past, right? That's why we time travel. And so the way you heal from these hauntings is you face the things that bother you. You don't you don't even have to know the events in the past. You don't. That's why therapy really kind of like burns in those neural pathways, which you don't
Yeah.
want. Right?
Agreed.
You don't.
Yep.
You can. Some of you guys know exactly some memories that bother you. That's okay. Some of you don't. Like, you don't have to know. All you have to know is And I walk through this too with people, is list everything that bothers you right now, like for a day. What people bother you, what situations, even if it's like a little frustration, list it out. Because those are the gateways to releasing this trapped emotions. So now you take those and you go through a perspective shift. You have to, the only way you can dissolve that sizzle or neutralize that sizzle of the past is you have to process it out. You have to face it. You have to sit with that uncomfortable feeling and allow it to overtake you. And I know that's uncomfortable and I know it doesn't feel good, but everything you stored as pain will come out as pain. That's okay. It's not going to harm you.
Yeah.
But we push it, we push it, we push it, we push it, right? Let's one by one, let's start just sitting and feeling, because once you allow that to go through your body, it processes out and it integrates within your being. You embody some new codes
Yes.
of life, right? And you disarm those things from the past. And the more you do that, the less that bothers you from the past, the less that will bother you in the future, because you're not as worried about protecting yourself from embarrassment or failure or things in the future, that you can be more present, if that makes sense, right?
Yep. One of the things you said there, I'm so grateful that you said it, because I see this as a problem. You said you sometimes don't even need to know where the emotion came from. So often people try to figure out where the emotion is coming from. And again, this is kind of like that pessimist optimist. You're looking for the wrong thing. So you're trying to solve the wrong thing. You're looking, you're a dog chasing its tail. You're never going to solve the problem. You're never going to catch it. And I think that's a really important thing for people to understand.
Yeah.
When I've coached individuals on a personal development level, like I have them take assessments like the Gallup, the color code, different things of that nature. And one thing after we're sitting down and going through that, I always explain to them, I just want to let you know, all of these are not set in stone. So if there's something you don't like or you see yourself differently, you can work on and change all of that stuff, right? Like nothing's set in stone. And I think it's so important to realize that, hey, I don't need to look at a certain memory. I don't need to do this. I just need to, and I thought it was really unique. He said, let's go through a day and just write down all the things that bring up a negative emotion.
That bother you. Yeah.
Start there. That's super important.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question that I'm sure a lot of people are kind of asking themselves right now. How quickly can they get results, and what's it look like working with you, right? Because so much in today's day and age, pop a pill, you're immediately better, right? Like, go to therapy. We might have this figured out in the next 5 years. Not really sure. We'll see where it's going on.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's work that needs to be done, but how quickly can people see results working with you?
It's like, yeah, the honest answer is it depends. And obviously people are rolling their eyes at that, but I've seen people within weeks transcend some things. I mean, if you are willing, this is the thing, it has nothing to do with me of your success, because this will work. It works for people, it works for me, because this is the root. Everyone has this trapped energy. Everyone has this conditioning. If you are willing to face this stuff in a safe way, to release it, knowing that it's processed out, knowing that you're dissolving this connection, this neural pathway with your amygdala and your nervous system that's causing these panic attacks. If you're willing to face the stuff in a safe way, and I've got you, and this works, within weeks, you're going to see dramatic life change. And me personally, what happened when I started this, I was having daily panic attacks, daily, like multiple. It was debilitating. And when I started this process, when everything clicked into gears for me about what I needed to do, because I didn't have all the pieces, but when I figured this out, I would say it took me about 2 months to not have any more panic attacks, which was insane, to go from multiple a day to 2 months and then they're gone. And then I thought I was out of the clear, and literally 2 or 3 months later, I was in the movie theater and had another panic attack. And I was like, oh shit, they're coming back, right? And
Yeah.
never again. That was it. Right. So that's my process. I've seen other people within weeks, I've seen other people within months, but this is the only way through your anxiety and panic. Like there's no other way than to face it in a safe, regulated way without the mind. And so what I'll say is if you're willing and you're committed to like not maintaining this the rest of your life, then this will work for you.
Yeah. I failed the memory test. You brought up multiple different unique methods that you help people through, and you just kind of talked about like you know going through like a day. So when someone is working with you, are they working with you one-on-one? Are they going through like different worksheets? What does that look like?
Yeah, this process is very much not heady and mental, as you can imagine, right? We're not going to be doing workbooks and thinking and taking tons of notes, right? Because you can't solve this with your mind. So every day I have people go through that guided track to surrender their body, to regulate. You have to release and regulate. And so I give you the best way to do that so that the mind is, you know, released too. It's not off. You're not shutting it. You're not doing anything. You're releasing control. You're reprogramming yourself to let go of your control, right? That's every day. That's on your own. The beautiful thing is you can do all this in the comfort of your bedroom, like
Beautiful.
on your own. So I have a weekly group call where if anyone has questions and they can ask that and get clarity, but it's all modules and self-guided. So I have people do exercises like I just gave, where you listing the things that bother you and you go through this catalyst integration, which in the comfort of your own room, it takes 5 to 15 minutes a day where you start releasing the sizzle of these things, these boulders inside of you, right? Releasing that steam and integrating. So it's all self-guided because you are the healer. Like your body, your natural intelligence will heal all of this if you get out of the way in a
Yeah.
way, right? And do it the right way. So it's very much people like because they can do it on their own. They don't need someone. I mean, I encourage you if you have someone who loves you to support you through this, but you can do this like I did in your bedroom on your own.
Looking at some of the clients you've worked with, like I said, you know, a lot of the clients that you work with are athletes, high performing individuals. You're kind of running the gamut there. Like, what are some of the, do you have a testimonial that you have right now, like on the top of your mind? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but just so people can kind of get a grasp of like maybe mid process or ending process, you know, a testimony you'd want to give from somebody.
Yeah. I had a woman very recently. This one just came to my mind. She when she came to me, and she didn't tell me this right away. She told me this after the fact. She said for 6 years, she never had 3 days in a row where she felt okay. She felt horrible, horribly depressed, horribly stuck, hopeless. Every day, almost every day for 6 years. No 3 day streak. Like, isn't that crazy?
Nuts.
Suicidal too. Had those thoughts, right? Just, I mean, this works to the depth, like to the deepest stuff. She said she 1 week into this program, she actually got worse. And people are like, what do you mean, John? Like she got worse because she expected this to work really quickly, you know, whatever. And she told me, she said, you know what? I watched the first module again. I forced myself to do it the way that you teach it, right? Not the way I thought. The next week she showed up and she was a completely vibrant, changed woman. Like she said, the last week, every day I felt amazing. She was able to unhook from something that was holding her that she didn't even know, she wasn't even conscious of, but she was able to figure that out on her own. I wasn't there telling her, drilling into her brain, looking for a memory. With these tools, you are able to, on your own, see the things that are hooking you and to release them. And so I still text her. She texted me the other day, actually. Like for months, she's felt on top of the world amazing ever since we worked and unhooked from these things. And so I share that example because Even I've helped people with suicidal thoughts from the depths of this stuff. This works for the worst of the worst, the low of the low situations, because whether it's anxiety, depression, panic, any of that, it's all basically the same root. This is not mental health. This is
Yep.
emotional.
I'm glad you use that, because I think a lot of people, I bet you that happens more times than not, that as someone's going through, hit a lower moment, because sometimes you have to face that monster underneath the bed to break through. And sometimes you're not quite ready for it to come up. You know, it's kind of, you always hear like someone has somebody in their life pass away, and they just go about their life like, huh, I'm fine. Like it's not, and all of a sudden 6 months later, it just hits them like a ton of freaking bricks, right? So I can imagine that going through that process. But to hear about her shift, and I think we've all had those dark moments in our life. We can look back and like, oh my gosh, that year was the worst year of my life, or whatever it may be. Um, how do people get a hold of you? We're running out of time. We're I know we both have appointments coming up here in a second. I will put links in the comments below. So if anyone wants to get a hold of John, you're able to. But how would people get a hold of you, John?
Yeah, again, I have this program for anyone with crippling anxiety, panic attacks, to release this for good. And you can go to releasepanic.com, and that'll give you all the information to contact me or to look over the details further of some of this process. I think it's important you understand kind of what you're going through, but this is the only way through it. And I really safely guide people through this. So it's been life-saving, not just for me, but for other people. So if you're interested or know a loved one who is suffering with panic attacks and is embarrassed by that, let me know, because there's nothing wrong with you guys, right? It's just a conditioning. It's just a way that we've kind of wired ourselves. And so now it's time to let go and rewire some of those things in a better way.
Is there anything you want to leave people with besides, obviously you just kind of left a really powerful thing? Is there anything else you want to just, a little nugget or little piece of sage advice? Or
Yeah. The advice I love to give people, if I could put anything on a billboard, I would say make peace with every single thing that bothers you. Because the things that bother you, again, are the gateway. The things that bother you inside emotionally, even subtly, even so subtly, if you can make peace with those things and sit with those things and feel those emotions, just let them do whatever the heck they want. Let the mind process that stuff. You will transcend it, you will transmute it, and you will start becoming unbotherable. Right? That's how you transcend anxiety, panic, depression. Is we're so bothered by things we don't even realize it. People say triggered. I don't like that word, because it's got a different connotation. It's overused. But bothered, everyone's bothered by people and situations and things. Those are the gateways. Those are the things that underneath the surface are causing all of your mental health issues or anxieties, depressions. And if you start making peace and know how to do that, which I guide people through, if they want the help, if they want to do it on their own and think they can do it, that's fine too. But make peace with the things and the people that bother you. Seriously, take ownership that it's not Scott's fault. It's not my mom's fault. It's not my wife's fault, my children's, whoever. I own everything that I'm holding on to.
yep,
They're not poisoning me. I'm poisoning myself by holding on to all this stuff and the tension in my body. Once you realize that and admit that, you can start facing it
beautiful.
and releasing it.
Agreed. John, thank you so much for joining us today. And I would love to have you on to go more, because I know we dove deep, but I think we can probably deep dive even more so.
Yeah.
And you are probably, one of the best coaches I've ever met
Thank you.
that talks about this, and the conversation we've had besides just on this podcast, and nothing but blessings to you and what you're doing, because you're going to change a lot of people's lives. So if you are dealing with anxiety, panic, John's the guy you want to reach out to him. So reach out and yeah, go change your life. So thanks again, John.
Thank you, Scott. People need to know the truth, and that's what I'm about here. Let's go into it.
Let's
Yeah.
do it. Appreciate you.
Thank you.